Levy Lewis is sent to a barony meant to kill him. Instead, every day he survives gives his hidden system another attribute point. Weeks earlier, he woke in a carriage carrying another man's memories. The body belonged to a 16-year-old noble exile with no life seed. His panel grants daily points and warns him whenever danger enters range. That makes survival itself a shortcut past his mediocre cultivation talent. His first warning exposes more than 50 thieves waiting in ambush. Clay's escort crushes them, proving Levy's impossible advantage works immediately. His last clear memory of Earth is heartbreak, alcohol, and a bottle smashed against his head at the end of a miserable night. The inherited memories identify him as the second son of a minor baronial family in Alpha Kingdom. His father is dead, his elder brother inherited the estate, and the original Levy was expelled after refusing a military career. An elderly servant named Charlie watches him from across the carriage, searching his face for the spoiled young master he remembers. Charlie raised Levy after his mother died, so even a small change in speech or behavior could expose that something is wrong. Levy lets the inherited memories settle before speaking, and Charlie's shoulders finally relax when the familiar voice answers him. The servant begs him to abandon the northern journey, while there is still road behind them and some chance of returning south alive. Stormwind, Levy's new barony, sits beyond Grey Fortress beside the Savage Mountains, where orc armies repeatedly spill into human territory. The original Levy heard where he had been sent, collapsed under the fear, and never truly recovered before this new soul arrived. That assignment followed an even stranger disaster in Tulip City, where Levy's appearance had attracted Marquess Angelus Tulip herself. Angelus legally married the obscure baron's son, instantly wrecking the plans of noble families hoping to gain her territory through marriage. At the wedding feast, the old Levy got drunk and created enough trouble to hand his new wife a convenient political solution. Angelus kept the marriage valid, arranged a baronial title for him, granted him Stormwind, and sent him far from Tulip City. On paper, it was an outrageous gift. On a map, it looked suspiciously like a nobleman's coffin placed beside the orc frontier. Levy cannot tell whether Angelus wants him dead, protected, or merely useful as a husband who blocks other marriage schemes from succeeding. He can tell one thing: openly murdering the Marquess's legal husband would create questions, while a frontier death could look perfectly respectable. An orc raid, a collapsed defense, or one unlucky battle could erase Levy without forcing any ambitious family to dirty its own name. Going back south might only bring him closer to the people who benefit from that outcome. So Levy rejects Charlie's plea to turn around. Glory can wait. Revenge can wait. His first objective is simply surviving long enough to discover who expects Stormwind to finish the job. That is when a translucent interface appears in his vision and changes the math behind every risk on the road. The panel records his flame-breathing technique, triple flame slash, unused attribute points, and an innate talent called super recognition. Super recognition can detect nearby danger, while the system promises another attribute point after each day Levy remains alive. Ordinary knights awaken a life seed with precious life source fluid before entering the extraordinary ranks. Levy can instead pour points into his breathing technique and force progress that his mediocre body might never reach through talent alone. Stormwind is still deadly, but now a dangerous day is also one more day of guaranteed growth if he lives through it. The first serious test arrives when super recognition marks an ambush hidden in the brush ahead of the column. Levy orders the carriage stopped and points out how unnaturally silent the roadside has become, with birds and small animals suddenly absent. Clay, captain of the Tulip Night Squad escorting him, studies the brush and finally notices the signs he had missed. Until now, Clay has treated Levy as unwanted cargo capable of getting 12 good soldiers killed on a pointless frontier assignment. The warning forces him to reconsider. He apologizes, pulls the squad into cavalry formation, and rides forward to test the road. The thieves were told they would hit weak mercenaries surrounding a useless young noble, so their leaders expect a quick robbery. Instead, Clay's veterans slam into them as one armored formation, using horses, discipline, and battlefield experience the bandits cannot match. The brush explodes into panic. Men who planned an ambush start running the moment organized cavalry punches through their center. Clay identifies the professional leading them and cuts him down before the man can reorganize the fleeing group. The bandit chief is only a first-tier warrior, but his presence confirms this was never a random group of desperate peasants with knives. Open ground makes escape almost impossible against mounted soldiers, and the remaining thieves scatter into the forest or drop their weapons. Most of the attackers end up dead or captured, while only a small number vanish far enough into the trees to escape pursuit. Levy watches the aftermath and learns how meaningless raw numbers can become when frightened bandits collide with veterans of an orc war. But the military lesson bothers him less than the question behind it. Common thieves should not willingly attack a properly escorted noble column. Clay drags a captured leader forward, and the man's courage breaks under threats before the knights need anything more brutal. The prisoner admits they were hired, without being told exactly who they were attacking, or how strong the escort would be. Levy sees the structure immediately. Someone spent disposable bandits to injure Clay's squad before a more dangerous stage of the journey. The thieves were never meant to win cleanly. They were cheap bodies used to shave protection away from Stormwind's new baron. Levy explains that logic to Clay, instead of pretending the knights failed him, and the resentment inside the escort begins shifting direction. Neither side chose this assignment. Both sides are being moved toward the same frontier by people safely somewhere else. For the next 2 years, Levy says, survival will require them to stop treating one another as the main problem. Clay accepts the practical alliance and promises the squad will do its duty if Levy treats the men as soldiers rather than disposable servants. Levy answers with a promise of rewards once Stormwind becomes stable enough to provide them, giving both sides a reason to make the journey work. 5 days later, the column reaches Grey Fortress, the northeastern stronghold standing between human lands and the Savage Mountains. The fortress was built around an old gold region and remains a major defensive point whenever orc forces push through the mountain approaches. Its 8th Battalion answers to Captain Clean, a 5th-tier Silver Knight with the authority and experience to dominate most local disputes. Before Levy can continue to Stormwind, he must collect the kingdom's frontier support package assigned to newly appointed barons. The program exists so soldiers rewarded with borderland receive enough workers, food, livestock, weapons, and manpower to make that land viable. Quartermaster Roland leads Levy toward the warehouse, and the smell tells them something is wrong before anyone crosses the doorway. Inside are sickly serfs, starving women and children, tools, rusted weapons, exhausted livestock, and soldiers no one would call elite. The official paperwork promises useful supplies. The warehouse contains whatever Grey Fortress apparently wants to throw away without admitting it. Clay looks ready to explode because he understands what bad labor and broken equipment mean once Stormwind has to feed and defend itself. A border settlement without healthy workers cannot plant enough grain, repair walls, move supplies, or replace soldiers lost in raids. Every useless sword in this warehouse is one future defender missing from a wall that already sits too close to orc territory. Levy refuses to give Roland the loud argument the quartermaster expects. Instead, he asks for a signed receipt listing these exact goods. Roland hesitates, so Levy quietly reminds him that Stormwind's grant ultimately connects back to Marquess Angelus Tulip. If a formal list reaches her desk, Roland's signature will sit beneath every missing weapon, dying servant, and substituted animal. The quartermaster suddenly has to choose which looks worse, admitting the package is fraudulent or personally certifying that it is acceptable. Levy smiles, says he will collect everything later, and even pays a gold coin to ensure the miserable supplies are carefully stored. If the delay lasts long enough, the paperwork can climb beyond the fortress and eventually reach Angelus, which is exactly what Roland fears. Then he rents a courtyard inside Grey Fortress and simply refuses to continue north. There is no reason to hurry towards Stormwind, while the people sabotaging him are more frightened of a paper trail than of his anger. Every day they delay also gives Levy another attribute point, turning bureaucratic obstruction into cultivation time his enemies never intended to provide. The next morning, he visits the fortress slave market searching for skills that a new territory cannot create quickly itself. Blacksmiths, masons, carpenters, bricklayers, and animal specialists matter more to him than simply buying the largest number of frightened laborers. Levy negotiates for a skilled group and forces the trader to include several household workers rather than padding the deal with useless promises. When the merchant describes 2 thin women and 2 children as generous family additions, Levy stores the insult behind a polite customer smile. Deeper inside the market, the cages change from human captives to goblins, pig-headed orcs, goat-headed people, and animal-featured demi-humans. One white wolf demi-human woman catches Levy's attention because everyone else sees expensive entertainment, while super recognition screams something else entirely. Behind her restrained posture is the presence of a 4th-tier great warrior, far beyond what any ordinary slave cage should be holding. The woman's hostility spikes the moment Levy seriously considers buying her, turning curiosity into a warning sharp enough to stop him cold. A 4th-tier professional has somehow entered a fortress protected by detection magic, while hiding her strength from the systems at the gate. Levy has no desire to become the first casualty of whatever operation placed her there, so he leaves without making an offer. Back at the courtyard, he tells Clay exactly what his talent revealed and waits for the captain's reaction. Clay would have dismissed the claim weeks ago, After the roadside ambush, he knows Levy has already detected one threat nobody else could see. A concealed fourth-tier demi-human inside Grey Fortress could kill soldiers, open defenses, or support an attack from within if ignored. Still, warning the wrong officer could turn the discovery into another weapon against Levy. So he orders Clay to study the command structure first. The useful political picture comes through merchant networks rather than official briefings, which tells Levy plenty about how the fortress really operates. Captain Clean comes from the powerful Lincoln family and has little connection to the southern factions surrounding Angelus. Vice Captain Auden belongs to another noble line and appears tied to the people obstructing Levy's frontier supplies. The second Vice Captain, Corey, has less political weight and no clear ability to control the fortress alone. Levy chooses Clean as the least dangerous officer to trust with a threat that could become catastrophic if handled carelessly. At Clean's residence, the captain initially expects another complaint from an angry young baron, cheated by his quartermaster. Instead, Levy tells him a concealed fourth-tier White Wolf demi-human is sitting inside the slave market beneath the fortress's own defenses. Clean stands immediately. If the claim is true, the security failure threatens both his soldiers and his career. His first instinct is disbelief because the gate arrays are specifically designed to expose professionals trying to enter under concealment. Levy provides the exact cage and recommends a quiet investigation before anyone starts a public fight inside a crowded commercial district. If Clean storms the market and causes losses, every merchant complaint will become evidence that his fortress failed before he even contained the threat. That practical reminder lands harder than any insult. Clean leaves personally with a controlled team instead of sounding an alarm. More than an hour later, he returns without the dismissive expression he wore before the inspection. The woman is exactly what Levy claimed, and now Clean wants to know how a supposed novice saw through concealment that fooled military magic. Levy cannot expose his system, so he borrows the reputation of the wife who sent him north. He claims specialized tulip magical equipment detected the infiltrator, a lie plausible enough because powerful nobles own tools ordinary officers never inspect. Clean stops examining Levy and starts wondering what Angelus may have prepared around her unwanted husband without telling anyone. That misunderstanding gives Levy the appearance of backing from the Tulip family while keeping super recognition safely hidden. Clean then confirms that Auden is the officer he distrusts most and the man responsible for the sabotage support package. Levy proposes using the infiltrator and Auden against each other instead of treating them as separate problems. When signs of a Knoll attack appear, Clean can order Auden to scout outside the fortress under normal military authority. That removes a compromised officer from the walls, while the garrison prepares to trap the infiltrator's attempt to support the attack. Any enemy scouts that escape can also become evidence that Auden failed his assigned mission, making the same operation useful against threats inside and outside the walls. If enemy scouts escape during the operation, Auden can carry the blame for failing to seal their retreat. Clean studies the young baron long enough to realize the spoiled exile in front of him thinks like someone who expects knives behind paperwork. Then he offers the deal Levy actually needs. Stay in Grey Fortress until the threat is resolved, and Clean will personally correct Stormwind supplies. Auden tried to starve Levy into failure, but the sabotage has now purchased him training time, leverage, and a potential ally inside the fortress. 10 quiet days pass, which is more uninterrupted cultivation than the hidden faction wanted Levy to have before reaching Stormwind. He spends mornings practicing flame breathing and afternoons forcing his clumsy archery towards something that might keep him alive at range. Normal practice barely moves the panel, confirming that the body's natural talent is painfully average despite its noble bloodline and good looks. Attribute points do not care about talent. They continue arriving one by one with every day Levy survives. By the 10th morning, he finally has enough save to attack the barrier, separating an apprentice from a real knight. Levy locks the room, warns Charlie not to disturb him, and pours accumulated points into flame breathing. The system compresses what feels like years of practice into his understanding, while his muscles tighten and power gathers around his heart. Then, the breakthrough becomes physical. Energy squeezes inward so violently that his chest feels as if something inside it is trying to rupture. Stopping would waste the safest chance he may ever receive. So Levy endures the pressure until the energy finally settles into a life seed. Extraordinary power spreads through his blood, and a little over an hour later he opens his eyes as a first-tier novice knight. The difference is obvious before he checks the panel. The body of an ordinary teenager now carries enough raw strength to kill a bull. The next requirement is less encouraging. Reaching second tier will demand vastly more progress than the first breakthrough cost. Daily points alone could take years, and Levy already knows Stormwind is not the kind of territory that grants quiet years for free. He starts searching for faster growth through archery, cultivation resources, and the energy essence mentioned by his innate talent system. Almost nobody learns about the breakthrough, because hidden strength is most valuable when the people arranging accidents still believe he is helpless. 5 more days pass before Roland returns and tries to pressure the Baron into accepting the bad package and leaving the fortress. Levy points out that his official collection window has not expired, then sends the quartermaster away with no new argument to exploit. Soon afterward, Super Recognition gives the warning Clean has been waiting for. 2 large Knoll battalions are approaching Grey Fortress with multiple mid-tier professionals, and the hidden White Wolf warrior is tied to the attack. The system's warning is precise enough to place the assault at midnight. 3 days later, information Levy cannot possibly explain honestly. He tells Clean that timing is a tulip intelligence estimate based on how long an infiltrator can safely remain in position before acting. Clean accepts the reasoning and immediately orders Auden to take 3 companies northeast into the mountains on reconnaissance. Auden erupts during the command meeting, calling the mission pointless and accusing Clean of abusing military authority. He even threatens to report the captain afterward. But an assigned field command leaves him no legal way to refuse without damaging himself further. Hundreds of soldiers ride out with Auden, while enemy scouts watch from the western mountains and debate whether the exposed column is worth attacking. They leave it alone because Grey Fortress remains the real prize, which keeps Levy's prediction intact where it matters most. Inside the walls, Levy continues training and spends 8 saved points to push basic archery into first-level mastery. At 50 meters, he can hit 7 targets out of 10, and at 100 meters 3 arrows still land accurately. Clay begins suspecting the Baron has absurd natural talent with a bow, an explanation Levy is perfectly happy to let him keep. On the 3rd night, the White Wolf infiltrator finally moves near the northern section, while coordinated violence spreads toward the gate. Fire rises near the entrance, alarm horns shake the fortress, and Knoll troops surge toward walls they believe are already compromised. Clean has deliberately allowed a narrow opening, turning the gate into a controlled killing zone instead of trying to seal every crack. By the time Levy reaches the north wall with Clay's squad, bodies already cover stone near the entrance, and the real assault is underway. Clean is fighting 2 5th-tier enemies farther east, which is enough reason for Levy to stay far away from that section. Second Vice Captain Corey directs the defense and sends Clay's squad to reinforce the battered 4th Company. The company barely has enough soldiers left to hold a full line, with only a handful of professionals among the exhausted defenders. Several Knoll warriors have already climbed onto the battlement, and more are rising on ladders below them. Levy raises his bow before Fear gets enough time to control his hands and targets the first low-tier professional he can clearly see. His arrow punches through the throat of a first-tier Knoll just as the creature gains the wall. A thread of white light leaves the corpse and sinks into Levy, and the panel records 1 point of energy essence. That is the first proof that personally killing extraordinary enemies can feed the hidden talent system instead of only earning battlefield merit. Company Commander Pierre shouts for the unknown archer to keep targeting professionals, snapping Levy's attention back to the men still climbing. Another first-tier enemy turns toward a human defender, exposing its eye for a fraction of a second, and Levy takes the opening. The second arrow drops it before the creature can establish itself on the battlement. A second-tier warrior notices the ranged threat and rushes Levy, but Clay intercepts with sword and armor before it can reach him. The stronger enemy drives Clay backward, yet the captain holds long enough to keep his lord from being cut apart. Then stones begin raining from below as Knoll slingers saturate the wall with blunt projectiles. Shields ring, helmets crack, shoulders buckle, and one apprentice knight beside Levy folds around a brutal hit to the chest. A projectile smashes close enough to make Levy's legs weaken, reminding him that no glowing panel can soften the sound of bones breaking nearby. This is his first real battlefield, and knowing the plan does nothing to make death look less ugly from a few steps away. Pierre kills a second-tier attacker and roars for the wavering soldiers to hold, paying for his command with blood before asking anyone else to obey. The retreating men stop. When the sling barrage weakens, Levy lifts his bow again and starts removing climbers before they can reach the line. Each successful shot means 1 less armored body for terrified soldiers to meet at sword distance. Clay and the company's professionals finally clear the enemies already standing on the battlement. A wounded second-tier Knoll tries to escape Clay by jumping from the wall, and Levy tracks the falling target instead of letting it disappear. His arrow drives into its heart before it reaches the ground, sending a much larger stream of white energy into the panel. 1 second-tier kill is worth 10 essence points, instantly changing how Levy values every professional target on the field. Another stronger warrior climbs into range, but repeated arrows cannot stop a 3rd-tier enemy from forcing its way onto the wall. Pierre answers with a military magic crossbow carrying an explosive enchanted bolt. Blue light flashes, the bolt detonates on impact, and the third-tier attacker disappears beneath an explosion violent enough to scatter fragments across stone. Levy looks at the weapon with new respect, because battlefield equipment can erase rank gaps when a trained shooter lands the right shot. The gnolls begin withdrawing from his section, and Levy nearly leans over the wall to chase more essence with his bow. Clay yanks him backward just before another stone volley crashes into the exact place his head would have occupied. The mistake cost Levy only a cold rush of fear, which makes it a cheap lesson by frontier standards. Once the barrage ends, he resumes firing at retreating shapes, although most professionals have already hidden among ordinary troops. Fourth Company then shifts toward another breached section, and Levy follows rather than retreating after building a reputation beside men still fighting. His legs are shaking, but they keep moving, and the group helps kill additional low-tier professionals during the push. Across the fortress, momentum finally turns as Grey Fortress's elite cavalry charges through the gate into the retreating Gnoll force. A fourth-tier defender tears through the enemy formation, while Clean presses the surviving fifth-tier leaders from the wall. One enemy captain dies under Clean's attack, while the other escapes into darkness before pursuit becomes too reckless. Corey recalls the cavalry once the survivors move beyond reliable firelight, refusing to trade a victory for an unnecessary chase. Cheers roll along the bloody walls when the last organized enemy force disappears into the night. Levy joins the celebration for a few seconds before the smell, the severed limbs, and the bodies overpower what remains of his adrenaline. He staggers aside and vomits until his stomach has almost nothing left to give. Clay's veterans do not mock him. Every man there remembers his first battlefield, and most admit later that theirs went much worse. Pierre finds Levy afterward, and is stunned to learn the effective archer had never fought a real battle before that night. The surprise becomes respect when he discovers the exhausted young shooter is Baron Stormwind himself, not some newly assigned garrison recruit. Pierre promises every confirmed kill will be entered correctly for the military judges, rather than disappearing into another officer's record. Levy returns to his rented courtyard and falls asleep so quickly that exhaustion wins before the battlefield can follow him into dreams. The next morning, Clean arrives with casualty numbers that make the defense look brutally efficient. Grey Fortress killed 865 gnolls, while losing 51 soldiers, including dozens of enemy professionals among the dead. The fallen attackers include 4th-tier and 5th-tier fighters, proving the fortress survived an assault far more serious than ordinary raiding. Stormwind's small group receives 1 8th-class merit and several 9th-class merits based on its confirmed kills. Levy personally holds 1 8th-class merit and 3 9th-class merits, rewards that matter far beyond simple military prestige. In Alpha Kingdom, enough merit can buy cultivation resources, convert into gold, and even support claims to rank or territory. The border wars are not only survival contests. They are one of the few ladders capable of moving talented commoners upward. Levy spends part of Stormwind's share on explosive magic arrows before the excitement can turn into decorative honors sitting on paper. Clay and his knights keep their own personal merits, which makes the entire squad stare at Levy as if he has misunderstood noble custom. Their previous masters expected family soldiers to push personal glory upward. Levy prefers soldiers who know their work actually belongs to them. He also distributes hundreds of compensation gold among the men, rather than quietly absorbing the money into his own household accounts. Then he makes the policy explicit. Families of soldiers who die for Stormwind will not be abandoned after the funeral. A fallen professional will also have one descendant trained toward the extraordinary path at the territory's expense. The promise is expensive, but Levy understands that men defend walls differently when their children do not fall with them. Clean suggests trading Levy's 8th-class merit for life source fluid, unaware the Baron has already awakened a life seed without it. Levy agrees because the rare resource can create another night later, which makes it more valuable than proving he never needed it himself. He uses additional merit to obtain a military magic crossbow, the same kind of battlefield equalizer Pierre demonstrated on the wall. Then Clean finally delivers the corrected frontier package he promised after the battle. 1,000 useful serfs arrive with 400 tons of grain, 20 tons of preserved meat, oxen, and 100 horses. 12 of those horses are proper war mounts hidden among the work animals. A quiet upgrade Clean does not bother advertising. The weapons and armor are military grade rather than rusted leftovers, exactly what a frontier barony beside the mountains actually requires. 10 of the 50 assigned soldiers carry old disabilities from previous campaigns, but their battlefield experience remains intact. Clean's guard points out that injured veterans can train recruits even when age or wounds make frontline service harder. Levy accepts them immediately because Stormwind needs men who understand battle more than it needs a parade of perfect bodies. Before departure, he announces the pension system to the entire group instead of keeping it as a private promise to Clay's squad. An ordinary soldier killed in service will leave 30 gold coins paid across 30 years to the family he leaves behind. A professional who falls will have one descendant trained toward professional status using territorial resources. The disabled veterans are the first to kneel, and the remaining soldiers follow them in swearing service to Stormwind. Gold could hire these men, but a policy about widows, children, and futures gives them a reason to care whether the territory survives. Levy leaves Grey Fortress carrying the supplies his enemies tried to deny him, along with merit, equipment, and a secret first-tier cultivation base. He also has enough energy essence to attempt the random awakening of a second innate talent before the migration begins. The panel consumes the essence and reveals ultimate speed, a talent that doubles attack speed, movement, reaction, and agility in its basic form. Levy reads the description twice before a grin slips out, because a first-tier knight can now move far faster than his visible rank suggests. Anyone who still attacks the harmless-looking Baron, based on appearance, will be gambling against a card they cannot see. The road from Grey Fortress to Stormwind is not long, but moving more than 1,000 people turns the trip into a slow frontier migration. Carts carry grain, tools, weapons, building supplies, and everything clean forced into the corrected package. Charlie travels among craftsmen and families, while veterans named Parker and Jenkins begin organizing the incoming soldiers into functional groups. Levy selects physically capable serfs for future military training, because 50 soldiers cannot protect farms, coast, castle, and roads at once. The first night passes under cold spring air, and rows of campfires spread along the road. The next morning, super recognition interrupts the march, with a warning 1 kilometer ahead. A third-tier human knight is fighting the same fourth-tier white wolf demi-human Levy saw hidden in the slave market. He immediately moves the civilian column south into the woods, sends livestock away from the road, and hides Clay's squad on the opposite side. Clay obeys without arguing, which tells Levy more about their changed relationship than any speech could. Minutes later, the fight reaches the prepared area exactly where super recognition predicted. The white wolf woman staggers into view badly wounded, with a human knight driving her down from behind. Clay recognizes the pursuer as Rig, commander of Grey Fortress's 3rd Company and one of Auden's men. Rig finally knocks the demi-human down and locks a magical slavery ring around her neck before noticing tracks from Levy's nearby column. He calls for whoever is hiding to come out, expecting perhaps a few frightened travelers rather than a prepared force. Levy steps onto the road with Clay's knights, while Parker and Jenkins reveal 50 soldiers from the opposite woods. The numbers erase Rig's confidence, but super recognition still feels open malice radiating from him. Rig tries to leave with the captive. Levy tells him he may leave the road, but the white wolf woman stays. That turns a political conflict into a blood feud. Rig draws his sword and says Levy's head will answer nicely for Auden's humiliation. Clay charges first with the knight squad compressed into formation, trying to overwhelm the lone third-tier officer through coordination. Rig's speed carries him aside while enchanted armor absorbs strikes that would have cut an ordinary fighter apart. One counterattack throws 2 apprentice knights down bleeding before Clay can force the squad back into position. Then the ground beneath Clay's horse collapses, revealing that Rig has hidden another profession beneath his knight training. Basic earth magic destroys the charge, and Clay flies from the saddle directly toward Rig's waiting blade. Levy fires the military crossbow before the finishing strike can fall. The enchanted bolt explodes against Rig's guard and throws him backward, while armor and reflexes barely keep the third-tier knight alive. Rig has now learned the supposedly helpless Baron carries military weapons capable of threatening professionals well above his visible level. 50 soldiers close in, so Rig tears the formation apart with another earth spell and sprints straight toward Levy. From his perspective, the young Baron is still the weak center holding everyone else together. Levy fires again, but Rig reads the trigger and avoids the explosive shot before it can catch him. The third-tier knight leaps with his sword raised, fully convinced one downward strike will end the problem. That is when Levy activates ultimate speed for the first time in real combat. Rig's killing blow cuts empty air, and Levy appears behind him before the officer can understand how the distance vanished. Triple flame slash bites deep across Rig's neck, but the rank gap and enchanted protection keep the wound from finishing him cleanly. Rig turns through the blood and tries to retaliate, proving a third-tier knight remains dangerous even after a near-fatal cut. Clay, back on his feet, throws his sword from behind and drives the blade into the wounded commander's forehead. Rig drops beside the road before another spell can form, leaving every nearby soldier staring at the Baron they had assumed needed constant protection. Levy notices the one frustrating detail immediately. Clay landed the finishing blow, so the third-tier death gives his panel no energy essence. Missing that reward hurts, but survival matters more than optimizing who owns a corpse during a fight. The two apprentice knights wounded earlier, Eric and Thomas, are still alive and receive treatment as soon as the road is secure. Levy promises their salaries will continue, and Stormwind will cover every medical cost caused by injuries suffered in service. Clay searches Rig while Levy lets the shaking in his hands settle now that the fight is actually over. The dead commander carries enchanted armor, 1,000 gold note, a magical bracelet, combat manuals, and a record of earth magic. The bracelet is paired with the slavery ring around the unconscious White Wolf woman's neck, transferring control directly to whoever wears it. Levy activates the artifact with night power and feels hatred flood across the connection from the wounded demi-human. What surprises him is the direction. Her hatred for gnolls is even sharper than her hatred for humans. That makes her earlier cooperation with the attackers look less like loyalty and more like coercion, though the truth will have to wait. Clay explains that the paired artifacts may allow transfer or removal later, but for now the ring can keep a fourth-tier warrior from killing them. Rig's belongings expose another problem because his magic training looks too expensive and specialized for Auden's family support alone. Someone with deeper resources may be backing the faction that wanted Stormwind weakened before Levy ever arrived. Levy refuses to chase that mystery beside a fresh corpse while 1,000 civilians remain exposed on an open road. The migration resumes, carrying a captive fourth-tier warrior, better equipment, and another reason to expect human enemies behind every frontier problem. Stormwind finally comes into view as a small stone castle surrounded by rough housing, farmland, exposed roads, coastline, and dangerous wilderness. The title no longer feels ceremonial once Levy sees how many weaknesses inside the territory now belong to him personally. Charlie starts assigning grain, workers, and storage before the last carts finish unloading. Parker and Jenkins position the veterans around gates, warehouses, and key approaches while everyone else is still searching for sleeping space. Levy walks the walls, fields, wells, roads, coast, and mountain routes, turning every piece of ground into a question about attack angles. Where would Gale wolves approach if prey drove them south? And where would orc raiders hide before striking harvest crews or supply wagons? How quickly could soldiers reach a farm under attack? And which road becomes a death trap if the castle gate is blocked? The answers are ugly because 50 veterans cannot cover an entire barony, with civilians spread across productive land. Levy organizes the available men into an infantry company and starts selecting stronger serfs for future recruitment. Parker and Jenkins receive real command responsibilities because old injuries did not erase the experience they earned surviving previous campaigns. Modern knowledge can help Levy organize work, but veterans still have to teach frightened recruits how to stand when weapons are coming toward them. The first days become a loop of food allocation, repairs, patrols, field inspection, drilling, and correcting shortages before they become emergencies. Charlie handles household administration, while Levy focuses on threats capable of erasing the territory faster than paperwork can rebuild it. Eventually, the White Wolf demi-human wakes under guard and gives Levy the name Mia. Her story explains why the hatred inside the slavery bracelet points in several directions at once. Mia comes from a White Wolf tribe that once lived in the Savage Mountains before Gale wolves drove them from their home and weakened them. Gnolls later captured the survivors, killed her father, and forced her into dangerous work connected to the assault on Grey Fortress. Her infiltration was never loyalty to the Gnolls. It was survival under captors she despised. The slavery ring still gives Levy control over her life, and neither of them pretends that makes their new relationship comfortable. He chooses distance and clear orders instead of cruelty because a fourth-tier warrior is both Stormwind's strongest shield and its most dangerous prisoner. Mia watches how the young lord treats soldiers, wounded men, and serfs, clearly waiting for him to become the kind of noble she expects. Instead, she sees wages paid, injuries treated, and workers assigned jobs without random abuse for entertainment. Her hostility does not vanish, but it stops sharpening every time Levy enters the room. Then she warns him about the threat that destroyed her own tribe, Gale wolves roaming the mountain region beyond Stormwind. The magical beasts hunt in packs, move with wind-enhanced speed, and can tear ordinary formations apart before slow troops adjust. A powerful wolf king still exists somewhere toward the mountains, making every southern movement of the packs a potential territorial crisis. Stormwind therefore needs food security and trained defenders before Levy can indulge fantasies about becoming a rich frontier lord. He orders the fields assessed before planting season, disappears, and starts restructuring the relationship between labor and survival. The serfs expect the usual arrangement where nobles take most of the harvest and leave workers permanently trapped under taxes they cannot escape. Levy offers a different incentive because starving, hopeless laborers make terrible farmers and even worse emergency soldiers. Adult men receive larger assigned plots, while women and children receive smaller allocations that can still support a household. Under Levy's plan, an adult male serf can work about 5 acres, while women and children receive smaller plots matched to what their households can manage. Only part of the land is heavily taxed, and consistent work over 5 years can move a serf towards civilian status. Military merit becomes another road upward for people willing to risk themselves in defense of the territory. Levy is not pretending this is charity. He wants workers who believe tomorrow can be better if Stormwind survives today. A spear held by someone defending a future for his child is worth more than one held only because a guard is standing behind him. Before the first harvest can test that theory, scouts report Nagas and sea creatures moving towards Stormwind's Bay. This is Levy's first battle as the actual lord responsible for the ground under everyone's feet. There will be no gray fortress wall, no clean, and no battalion large enough to absorb a bad decision for him. He gathers every usable fighter before a shoreline raid can become a massacre among workers and families. Infantry takes shields and spears, while archers choose dry positions where wet sand will not ruin their footing. Mia stays near the strongest pressure point because no ordinary soldier in Stormwind can replace a 4th-tier warrior in close combat. Levy remains behind the front line with his bow, using the role where his current skill can contribute without wasting his hidden speed in reckless melee. The first Naga shapes emerge through surf and shallow water with sea creatures moving around them. Stormwind's new recruits tighten formation as veterans shout distances, correct shield angles, and keep the line from bending before contact. Arrows hit scales, spears meet wet bodies, and a quiet beach becomes a battlefield in seconds. Levy ignores ordinary targets when possible and searches for professionals worth both battlefield value and energy essence. A first-tier Naga exposes itself during a charge, and his arrow finds the opening before the creature reaches the shield line. White energy enters the panel as it falls, giving Levy a visible reward that helps steady his mind under battlefield pressure. Mia moves through the fighting at a speed and strength that makes the ordinary veterans around her look almost fixed in place. Whenever a stronger sea warrior threatens to punch through the line, she forces it backward before panic can spread among the recruits. The battle is not easy, but Stormwind remains intact because the line holds long enough for its strongest fighter to solve the worst problems. Then gale wolves appear near the coast, drawn by blood, prey, or their own conflict, with creatures spilling from the sea. For a moment, Levy cannot tell whether a second enemy has arrived or whether the battlefield is about to become something stranger. The wolves answer by attacking the Nagas instead of the human line. Levy immediately stops any soldier tempted to interfere and pulls Stormwind's formation back enough to preserve strength. If 2 dangerous groups are volunteering to kill one another, he has no reason to spend human lives making the exchange less efficient. The coast becomes a 3-sided slaughter with no real alliance, only predators choosing whichever target is closest. Naga weapons cut down gale wolves at the waterline, while wind-fast beasts tear into exposed sea warriors whenever their formation opens. Stormwind's archers punish professionals who drift too close to the human line and otherwise let the 2 enemy groups reduce each other. By the time the pressure breaks, the beach holds more monster corpses than Stormwind could afford to hunt deliberately in months. The surviving gale wolves begin withdrawing, but super recognition suddenly catches a presence so heavy that Levy's stomach tightens. A wounded 8th-tier black and white giant bear is approaching the battlefield. Stormwind has nothing capable of meaningfully injuring a creature at that rank, and Mia's 4th-tier strength suddenly feels very small. A 6th-tier Naga also appears near the coast, powerful enough to dominate everyone still standing except the approaching beast. The giant bear moves first, and its presence alone crushes the confidence of the smaller creatures around it. The 6th-tier Naga chooses retreat rather than challenging a wounded opponent still far above its own rank. Levy raises a hand and orders every defender to hold fire, because provoking the bear would be an excellent way to end Stormwind in one mistake. Then the enormous creature speaks directly into his mind and introduces itself as Storm Panda. Levy stares at a nearly 5-meter black and white beast with 8th-tier power and briefly wonders whether this world is mocking him personally. Panda's first request is unexpectedly mundane. It wants strong alcohol, much stronger than the weak wine available around Stormwind. It also needs powerful fire attribute materials to recover from its injuries, something Levy cannot conveniently provide yet. That request makes high-rank fire materials strategically valuable even when selling them would produce immediate cash. Telling an 8th-tier magical beast that its shopping list is unreasonable seems unwise. So Levy looks for a solution he can actually build. His Earth memories offer one: distillation. Charlie gathers jars, bamboo tubes, hides, mud, and kitchen equipment, while Levy sketches a crude still beside the castle. Local wine is heated in sealed containers. Vapor is guided through cooling tubes, and condensed liquid comes out far stronger than what went in. The first batch tastes rough enough to punish careless drinking, but it carries exactly the strength Panda wanted. The giant bear loves it, turning a desperate kitchen experiment into diplomacy more valuable than most noble treaties Levy could afford. Levy promises a continued supply if Panda remains friendly towards Stormwind, and the wounded beast accepts with obvious enthusiasm. One ugly still has just bought the territory protection that no current soldier, wall, or treasury could purchase directly. Only after that arrangement feels stable does Levy begin counting what the coastal battle left behind. Gale wolves provide hides, tendons, bones, meat, and magical cores, while Nagas and sea beasts leave scales and other valuable materials. Levy keeps the most valuable Gale wolf core in his own storage, since a high-tier magical core may matter more in a future deal than its current sale price. Clay estimates the saleable harvest at roughly 15,100 gold coins, enough to make several nearby nobles very interested. Yesterday, the wolves were a threat to Stormwind's fields. Today, their bodies are capital capable of rebuilding the territory several times over. Levy refuses to let that windfall become decorative wealth sitting inside a chest. A box of gold cannot answer an assassin, repair a wall, or hold a shield line when raiders arrive. He plans 2 more military companies, 3 archer squads, additional armor, swords, spears, bows, arrows, and proper training equipment. Clay and Roger need enchanted protection because experienced professionals are already too valuable to lose to ordinary gear. Army growth also requires workers to produce food, buildings, transport, and replacement supplies behind every soldier carrying a weapon. Levy therefore plans to buy hundreds of able-bodied serfs, additional young female workers, grain, and enough cheap wine to keep the distillery running. Most of the expected monster profit is committed almost immediately, which is exactly how Levy wants it. Wealth only matters if it becomes reaction speed, food security, infrastructure, or professional strength before the next attack. Charlie receives orders to restore damaged farmland before opening unnecessary new acreage, and beast damage will not be charged against the workers. If an uncontrollable monster raid can erase 5 years of labor anyway, Levy's promise of freedom becomes just another noble lie. Clay uses purifying water to remove Gale wolf scent around homes and fields while deliberately leaving traces closer to the coast. Levy would rather future predators follow the smell away from people than wander through grain stores looking for its source. Roger watches the shoreline for returning Nagas, while Panda remains both Stormwind's strongest nearby deterrent and its largest uncertainty. A recovered 8th-tier beast could be a terrifying ally, but nothing stops it from changing priorities except relationship, convenience, and continued liquor. Levy treats the distillery as strategic infrastructure from that day forward. Soon, a smaller black and white bear begins appearing around the territory, adding one more bizarre guest to Stormwind's growing list of assets and risks. Once the excitement fades, Parker and Jenkins organize the coastal carcasses into hides, cured meat, tendons, bones, and stored magical materials. The valuable cores remain controlled because sudden wealth can attract human predators faster than the wilderness does. Stormwind was already targeted when it had almost nothing. 15,000 gold creates thousands of fresh reasons for enemies to become creative. Levy decides the monster materials will move quietly through Grey Fortress, using Clean's network, rather than through open merchant competition. Mia stays concealed because a 4th-tier demi-human from the earlier infiltration appearing beside Levy would create questions he gains nothing by answering. The trip can also bring back the weapons, workers' grain, armor, and alcohol already included in Stormwind's expansion plan. Clay and trusted soldiers can handle the visible exchanges, while Mia stays out of sight to avoid reopening questions about the infiltrator from the slave market. By now, Levy recognizes the pattern. Every threat becomes useful only after Stormwind survives long enough to harvest what it leaves behind. News of Stormwind's growth reaches Grey Fortress before Levy's monster cargo does, and Auden reacts badly to hearing the Exile is prospering. The deputy captain's faction already lost soldiers during the failed field mission. Clean gained influence, and Rig disappeared without explanation. Levy returns to the fortress with valuable materials hidden beneath ordinary cargo, while Mia remains outside the walls. Pierre happens to be on gate duty and congratulates the young Baron after learning his visible cultivation has advanced into formal knighthood. The timing looks recent enough that nobody needs to suspect Levy crossed the threshold before the battle without life source fluid. Auden hears about Levy's arrival almost immediately, and super recognition still catches hostility around the deputy captain's people. Clean's reception is completely different, almost friendly, compared with their first meeting over the rotten supply warehouse. He describes Auden's punishment, battlefield losses, and the political damage caused by the failed reconnaissance mission. Levy listens without mentioning that Riggs' enchanted gear and the captive White Wolf warrior are now both serving Stormwind's interests. Then he reveals the real reason for the visit by producing high-grade Gale Wolf parts, Naga scale, sea monster materials, and magical cores. Clean stops treating the meeting as social conversation the moment he sees how much wealth Stormwind gathered within only a few weeks. He agrees to buy and distribute the goods through trusted channels, gaining a profitable supply relationship without exposing Levy's new income publicly. Levy asks for purchased supplies to be delivered outside Grey Fortress near Cane River, keeping his larger movements away from curious eyes. Clean agrees because long-term access to monster materials is worth more than squeezing the young Baron on a single transaction. While trade arrangements move forward inside the fortress, Auden sends trusted men toward outlaw groups living deeper in the Grey Mountains. Levy's watchers notice the movement and report it quickly, because wounded officers do not send personal guards into bandit country for sightseeing. For a short time, business and assassination preparation unfold in the same fortress without either faction admitting what it is doing. Levy leaves only after Clean finishes the purchases, and this time he refuses to travel in the obvious position inside his own column. A soldier with a similar build wears the Baron's visible clothing, while the real Levy follows a separate route with Clay and hidden support. The groups stay far enough apart to conceal the deception, but close enough that either can reinforce the other if an attack begins. The first day passes quietly, allowing any observers to grow comfortable with the false target traveling in the main column. Around noon the next day, Super Recognition detects a prepared ambush involving roughly 200 thieves. Among them are a third-tier advanced warrior, a second-tier professional, lower-ranked fighters, and far more elite men than the first roadside attack used. Auden is no longer spending disposable rabble. Someone is paid for a force expected to finish the job. Levy warns Clay and orders the forward unit into a defensive formation before the thieves can exploit surprise. The masked organizers realizes his trap has been discovered but attacks anyway, because 200 armed men still look overwhelming on paper. Clay locks shields and spears together using the same discipline Stormwind practiced against sea creatures. Several new recruits step backward when human attackers burst from cover, because murder on a human face feels different from charging monsters. Clay reminds them these are thieves, not heroes, while veterans beside the recruits laugh at men who only attack targets they expect to be weaker. The line steadies under that ridicule, and the bandits lose the panic they were counting on before reaching spear range. Then Levy appears on the flank with Mia and Creel's concealed soldiers, turning the ambush into a battlefield the attackers never planned for. Mia is ordered directly toward the third-tier leader, while Creel hits the exposed side without allowing his formation to dissolve into pursuit. Levy opens with an arrow through a first-tier professional before the thieves even understand a second Stormwind force exists. Mia reaches their strongest fighter and sends him flying during the first serious exchange, instantly changing the morale of everyone watching. Creel's soldiers crash into the flank while Clay abandons pure defense and advances from the front. The thieves are suddenly trapped inside the killing ground they prepared for someone else. A second-tier masked fighter tries to rally them, but Levy puts an arrow through his throat before the order can spread. Once that professional drops, ordinary bandits start throwing weapons away, faster than the remaining leaders can threaten them back into formation. Levy promises surrendering men their lives, accelerating the collapse and separating desperate prisoners from fighters still choosing resistance. The third-tier leader breaks toward the trees, only for Mia to hunt him down and sever the arm carrying his weapon. Levy initially considers interrogation, then sees the injured professional as a reward only his system can collect. He finishes the crippled fighter with an arrow, and a dense surge of energy essence enters the panel. A single third-tier kill is worth 100 essence points, enough by itself to upgrade an innate talent. Levy chooses Super Recognition because seeing danger earlier matters more than reaching it faster. The intermediate version doubles daily warnings, expands detection to 2 kilometers, and preserves the close-range hostility sensing he already trusts. Ultimate speed remains powerful, but speed cannot dodge an enchanted arrow fired from outside the distance where Levy knows anyone is watching. Stormwind cleans the battlefield and interrogates survivors while Clay identifies the dead second-tier masked man. The corpse belongs to Auden's personal guard captain, tying the attack directly to the deputy captain even if officials later prefer softer language. Clay warns that the fortress may value institutional reputation more than public scandal, so proving everything openly could become complicated. Levy does not need Auden executed immediately. Pushing him away from Stormwind's supply road would already be a useful victory. The prisoners also reveal a bandit stronghold, deeper in the mountains with a limited combat force, and more than 600 serfs under control. Stormwind was preparing to buy population with gold, and now a weakened outlaw group is holding hundreds of workers within marching distance. Levy decides the stronghold is worth taking, expecting the captive labor to matter more than whatever coins the bandits stored. Before he can move, upgraded super recognition pays for itself almost immediately. A third-tier knight and archer is observing them from a mountaintop nearly 2 kilometers away, right at the edge of Levy's new warning range. The old version of the talent would never have seen him, meaning the first warning might have arrived as an arrow already in flight. Levy shifts behind Mia without looking toward the hill and quietly gives Clay the description. Clay recognizes the likely organization as the Divine Eye Society, notorious for long-range vision, assassination, and elite archery. Alpha's royal family purged the group decades earlier, after it became involved in succession violence, making any connection to it politically dangerous. Hiring one of its killers inside the kingdom suggests Aden's backers are becoming desperate or careless enough to cross a much darker line. Mia proposes dragging the superior archer into dense forest where distance and open sight lines cannot protect him. The main force continues toward the bandit position, while Levy, Mia, and Clay remain behind and disappear among the trees. Clay carries the magic crossbow, Levy keeps a quieter bow, and Mia positions herself where she can collapse distance once the assassin commits. The Divine Eye killer follows rather than abandoning what still looks like a manageable target, protected by only 2 companions. He may suspect Levy somehow noticed him, but a first-tier frontier baron still does not look like a reason to retreat. The first arrows cut through branches before either side holds a clean view of every opponent. Clay's explosive bolts answer from another angle, while Mia tries to force the assassin away from open shooting lanes. Third-tier enchanted equipment absorbs attacks that would kill an ordinary professional, and the man's experience makes his rank advantage feel even larger. Then the assassin's eyes flash red toward Mia, and a mental attack floods her senses with violence and terror. The fourth-tier demi-human freezes for a fatal moment, allowing his weapon to carve a deep wound across her chest. The slavery ring snaps Mia back to awareness before the attacker can finish her, an ugly control mechanism saving her life for once. Clay takes an arrow through the shoulder during the same exchange, leaving both of Levy's stronger companions bleeding. Levy keeps shooting because retreating blindly would give the long-range specialist exactly the space he wants. The assassin changes priorities and drives toward the Baron, again deciding the apparently weakest body is the center that should die first. He believes killing Levy will break coordination between the controlled demi-human and the remaining wounded knight. It is the same strategic mistake Rig made, except this opponent is more skilled and has already injured everyone around Levy. Levy calls for Clay and Mia to attack from opposite sides at the same moment. The explosive crossbow threatens one flank while Mia closes from the other, forcing the assassin to divide his attention among 3 dangers. He commits forward anyway because Levy still appears easiest to reach. Ultimate speed activates, and instead of backing away, the Baron suddenly countercharges straight into the killer's line. The 2 cross at full speed while Clay and Mia pressure from behind, leaving the assassin no clean direction to evade. Triple Flame Slash completes the exchange, and the Divine Eye killer's head separates before he can recover from Levy's sudden acceleration. This time Levy owns the finishing blow, and another 100 essence points enter the panel. The assassin understands Levy carries a knight talent only in the final instant when that information can no longer save him. Mia staggers against a tree with blood running across torn armor, while Clay's treated shoulder has left his face pale under the dirt. Levy gives Mia medicine and turns away while she handles the wound beneath damaged clothing. She confirms the strike missed bone and tendon, painful enough to matter, but not enough to destroy her combat ability permanently. Only then does Levy search the assassin's equipment and discover how expensive the attempt on his life really was. The corpse carries a full 3rd-tier enchanted set, several thousand gold in notes, a high-level archery manual, and a potion recipe. The manual teaches wind-chasing arrow technique, perfectly matched to Levy's growing reliance on ranged combat. The recipe is even more valuable because its main ingredient comes from magical wolves. Stormwind has already killed in abundance. Wolf Fighting Fire Potion can greatly accelerate 1st-tier knight cultivation and still provide some benefit after reaching 2nd tier. Its core material requires blood or marrow from at least a 2nd-tier magical wolf. Stormwind has recently collected more Gale Wolf bodies than any reasonable frontier lord would ever want near his fields. The ingredients, recipe, and Levy's urgent need for faster progress have arrived together through an assassin sent to stop that progress. He takes the killer's 3rd-tier armor for himself and redistributes older enchanted protection rather than leaving useful equipment on a corpse. The hired killer came to weaken Stormwind and instead delivered armor, a combat technique, and a cultivation formula directly into Levy's hands. Levy still destroys the body rather than presenting it at Grey Fortress for military merit. Clay dislikes sacrificing the reward, but Levy values uncertainty more than a visible 7th-class merit tied to a secretive assassination society. If Divine Eye cannot confirm where its member died, revenge becomes slower, more cautious, and harder to aim. The weakened bandit stronghold falls soon afterward with almost no meaningful resistance left to organize a defense. Stormwind captures 31 remaining bandits and 682 serfs who had been forced to work under them. Roughly 200 tons of grain fills the stores, and recovered weapons can support 2 more military companies after repair. The population matters more than the captured coin, because Stormwind's largest shortage is still human labor. Farmers, builders, miners, carrier, craftsmen, and future recruits are all drawn from the same limited pool of bodies. Levy leaves the cultivated settlement intact, rather than burning it after taking control. Fields inside the mountains could later support patrols, refugees, supply stations, or another military position if the territory expands. 2 days later, Clean's promised delivery meets Stormwind's people beside Cane River as arranged. Levy hands over the captured 3rd-tier bandit leader's records and Auden's dead guard captain for official handling. Clean now holds enough evidence to make the deputy captain's position painful, without revealing the Divine Eye connection Levy wants buried. Back at Stormwind, Levy spends another 100 essence points to raise ultimate speed to intermediate level. The upgraded talent triples his attack speed, movement, reaction, and agility compared with his normal state. His base cultivation is still only 1st tier, but his movement can now surpass what many ordinary 3rd-tier knights expect to see. The territory expands around that hidden advantage, as Creel receives another infantry company, and Russell forms a spear company. Will and Lowry begin building a larger archer unit from recruits who show useful coordination, eyesight, and patience. In less than a month, Levy's private force grows toward half a battalion, consuming grain, salary, equipment, and training time almost as quickly as wealth appears. Then Charlie brings an unusual middle-aged man from among the newly rescued serfs. The dark-skinned stranger claims to be a merchant from the distant southern kingdom of Geralt, a story Clay challenges immediately. Northern waters belong to Nagas and dangerous sea creatures, so ordinary long-distance trade ships do not casually appear near Stormwind. The man introduces himself as John Chris and says a maritime disaster destroyed his vessel before currents and bad luck carried him north. He survived the wreck, reached land, and later fell into the hands of mountain bandits. The explanation is strange, but the next fact matters far more. John is also a 2nd-tier potion master. Levy has just acquired a valuable cultivation formula without anyone capable of refining it, and now a trained potion master is standing under guard. He questions John about the wreck before deciding how much freedom such a coincidence deserves. John describes powerful survivors from the expedition, including a high-ranked knight and mage who fought an even stronger sea dragon. Those people escaped elsewhere, leaving John unsure whether anyone will ever search this frontier for one missing 2nd-tier specialist. Levy judges the immediate risk manageable and gives him controlled freedom in exchange for useful work. Then he asks a question that has bothered him since learning Rig possessed both martial and magical professions. Can John test whether Levy himself has any real aptitude for magic? John explains that the test only requires a simple array, suitable magical material, and enough controlled activation to observe elemental response. Levy supplies what he needs, and patterns light across the ground while elemental energy gathers around the young baron. The result is genuine. Levy has magical aptitude strong enough that learning basic cultivation is worth the effort. John introduces meditation as the foundation, and later shares a lava meditation method he knows well enough to teach safely. Once Levy actually understands the technique, the panel records it like any other learnable skill. The system does not care that he began as a knight, which means magic can become a second progression track beside flame breathing. John also carries southern knowledge that makes several northern monopolies look much less absolute. Advancement potions guarded as strategic secrets by Alpha's great nobles are more familiar in southern regions where recipes and ingredients circulate differently. He recognizes formulas that northern officers treat like forbidden knowledge and discusses their primary materials without acting as if kingdoms should fall over the information. Levy realizes some scarcity in Alpha comes from nature, some from geography, and some from powerful families controlling who is allowed to know what. Stormwind's remote position becomes less hopeless if outside knowledge can bypass limitations richer nobles consider permanent. Then Levy tests an even simpler monopoly sitting directly beside his territory, salt. Stormwind borders an ocean containing more raw salt than any merchant warehouse could stock, yet households still pay heavily for processed supplies. He takes Charlie to the coast and begins crude evaporation experiments using seawater and heat. Red and white crystals remain after the water reduces, and Charlie recognizes the coarse salt the moment he tastes a tiny amount. Salt already matters to households, food preservation, and military kitchens, so Stormwind does not need to invent demand before trying to sell it. Levy stops him from celebrating too quickly because raw sea salt still carries impurities and needs better processing before regular use. Even so, the essential resource is almost free at the point of collection, making purification and production the real problem. A coastline that looked like exposed military weakness has just become an enormous raw material deposit. Stormwind does not need to mine underground. While Levy thinks about salt workshops and future trade, patrols report a much less profitable problem moving near cultivated land. Ogres have entered the region around Stormwind's fields, likely pushed by the same monster pressure disrupting other territories in the mountains. 11 cannibalistic giants near crops can destroy months of labor in a single afternoon, so waiting behind the castle is not an option. Levy mobilizes soldiers and brings Mia, John, and ranged support because adult ogres possess dangerous strength even without formal cultivation. The engagement opens with shields, spears, archery, magic, and Mia assigned to whichever enemy proves strongest. One ogre's bone club destroys a wooden shield and throws the soldier behind it across the ground before nearby spearmen can close the opening. John uses basic fire magic to force stronger creatures into defensive reactions instead of allowing them to charge the line freely. Levy draws the third-tier enchanted bow taken from the Divine Eye Assassin, immediately feeling how brutally the weapon drains his first-tier knight power. His first heavy shot forces a fourth-tier ogre to dodge, and that single movement gives Mia the angle she needs. Her enchanted weapon cuts through the creature's defense and kills the strongest enemy before it can recover. With that pressure removed, Stormwind's wounded infantry has enough space to rebuild formation, instead of collapsing around the opening. John then blinds a third-tier ogre with flame for only a short moment. But Levy needs no more than that. A third-tier enchanted arrow lands during the opening and kills the creature, sending another large wave of essence into the panel. The shot drains Levy so badly he takes recovery medicine before he can safely draw the weapon again. Mia kills another high-ranked target before Levy can claim its essence. A reminder that battlefield survival matters more than farming every reward personally. Levy switches to enemies his remaining power can handle and finishes a second-tier ogre through ordinary archery. Roger kills the final second-tier opponent, ending organized resistance among the 11 attackers. Stormwind wins, but the field is covered with wounded soldiers and shattered equipment rather than anything that feels clean. Parker counts 15 serious injuries, with several men damaged badly enough to risk death or permanent disability. 3 soldiers are already beyond what ordinary medicine can likely reverse. Levy brings John over and asks whether healing magic can save them, only to receive the answer he least wants. The injuries require healing far above John's present spell level, and there is no stronger healer waiting inside Stormwind. Lant, Lachi, and Kenny are dying while the rest of the army is still processing the fact that the field survived. 2 are experienced soldiers with families connected to Grey Fortress, while Kenny began as a serf and has no recorded family waiting anywhere. Levy promises Lant and Lachi's families every payment Stormwind owes, along with future protection inside the territory. Then he turns to Kenny, refusing to treat an unclaimed man as if dying without relatives makes his sacrifice cheaper. Before Kenny dies, Levy declares him a free commoner and names the valley after him. The same ground will become a cemetery for soldiers killed defending Stormwind, and a hall of heroes will preserve their names publicly. Levy also establishes an annual Heroes' Day for those who die in territorial service. Parker drops to one knee first, while blood and dirt still cover his armor, and Jenkins follows without being ordered. The surrounding soldiers kneel with them and pledge themselves again, this time not because a contract or salary sheet requires it. They have just seen what happens when service becomes fatal, and there is nothing left for a dead man to repay. A serf with no family can still receive citizenship, burial, a remembered name, and a place in the territory's public history. John watches the scene without deciding whether Levy is unusually decent or simply terrifyingly good at understanding what loyalty costs. Most nobles spend resources on people who can still produce returns. Levy is spending status and stone on men who cannot give anything back. That choice creates commitment more efficiently than several calculated rewards did, precisely because the soldiers know it cannot be collected from the dead. After the burials in Kenny Valley, Levy checks the panel and finds the ogre battle has added another useful pool of energy essence. Wind-chasing arrow technique has also gained progress through actual combat. where mistakes teach faster than safe target practice. Stormwind returns home carrying ogre materials, wounded soldiers, and a new tradition born from 3 deaths beside his own farmland. Levy orders the Hall of Heroes built, even though the same stone and labor could produce something directly profitable. If he expects men to die for Stormwind, he considers remembrance part of the military cost rather than a sentimental luxury. Soon afterward, patrols discover something living that may repay the territory without requiring another funeral. John notices a strange grove of straight young trees north of Stormwind and immediately calls Levy over. They are arrow trees, a second-tier magical material prized for producing shafts suitable for enchanted ammunition. John explains that proper harvesting leaves the root systems alive and allows another usable crop to return in roughly a year. The grove is not buried treasure. It is military inventory that literally grows back if nobody ruins the roots. Levy orders Parker to harvest only suitable trunks and makes John demonstrate the correct cuts before anyone touches the larger section. Soldiers count 862 usable trees after the careful harvest. 523 meet first-tier standards, while 339 qualify as second-tier material. At Grey Fortress prices, the grove represents roughly 2,000 gold coins in renewable annual value. Contrast is impossible to miss. Ogres cost Stormwind dying men, while these trees can generate profit without demanding blood first. Levy assigns 2 squads to protect the grove around the clock from animals, careless workers, and opportunistic thieves. No one gets to destroy a renewable ammunition source, because it looks like ordinary woodland from a distance. Charlie distributes the ogre battle rewards, while Creel receives responsibility for building the Hall of Heroes without delaying essential defenses. 50 carefully selected serfs then sign ordinary contracts and enter the Baron's household service for salt production and high-proof liquor. Levy wants loyal hands around the 2 workshops, most likely to become valuable, before outsiders understand how much they can produce. The new arrangement also proves another point to Stormwind's laborers. Useful skill can move a person out of hereditary serf status. Levy also formalizes his arrangement with John, instead of leaving their growing dependence on a gentleman's promise. A second-tier contract backed by the Church of Dawn protects both men and reduces the fear that either side will exploit the other after success arrives. John can refine valuable potions without expecting Levy to seize his knowledge, while Levy can invest rare ingredients without expecting his potion master to vanish. With that foundation settled, John begins teaching Levy the lava meditation method properly, rather than only explaining the theory behind it. Levy sits expecting a long struggle and enters meditation much faster than John considers normal for a beginner. Fire-aspected energy gathers in his awareness like heat pressing through closed eyelids, and the panel confirms the method as a learned cultivation path. The exile who arrived as an unawakened knight is now training as a magic apprentice while hiding 2 innate talents from nearly everyone around him. Clay soon interrupts that progress with another discovery, even more important to a territory trying to build its own army. On the largest of 5 small islands beyond Stormwind's Bay, patrols have found exposed iron ore. Levy crosses the water with Mia and meets John already examining the rocky site. John warns that prospecting is not his specialty, but the southern portion clearly contains a medium-sized deposit and perhaps a larger vein below ground. Levy looks at the exposed rock and sees weapons, tools, armor, nails, and independence from merchants who can raise prices whenever Stormwind becomes desperate. The deposit only matters if the territory can mine, transport, smelt, and shape the ore at useful scale. He assigns 300 able-bodied serfs to begin surface extraction, while Russell's spear company rotates guard duty over the island. Carpenters and boat builders receive orders for 20 additional small vessels, so ore can move reliably between the island and the mainland. The first inspection of Stormwind's smithing district shows how far the territory still has to go. Its furnaces are small, inefficient, and barely capable of meeting current repair demands, never mind supporting expanded military production. Levy cannot recreate an industrial revolution from memory, so he focuses on improvements local craftsmen can actually understand and build. Better airflow comes first. Larger, more efficient bellows can increase furnace heat and reduce the labor wasted forcing air by hand. A water-powered system would be better, but Stormwind lacks the nearby current needed to make one reliable at the workshop site. For now, muscle, smarter furnace design, and better organization have to turn exposed ore into usable metal before the next crisis arrives. While discussing materials with John, Levy notices that fire is not the only elemental energy answering his meditation. Earth responds as well, revealing a second affinity he did not know the body possessed. John is genuinely surprised because cultivating multiple elements usually slows a mage by dividing time, resources, and practice. Levy has a system that gives him attribute points every day, so normal efficiency rules do not apply as cleanly to his growth. He chooses to learn earth magic anyway, valuing battlefield utility over the conventional advice to specialize early. 5 days later, Earth Collapse appears among his usable spells. The first test tiers open a shallow depression several meters away, roughly 3 meters across and about half a meter deep. That does not sound impressive until Levy remembers Clay nearly dying, when Rig used the same principle under a charging horse. A battlefield spell does not need to kill someone if it can put that person exactly where a spear, arrow, or blade is waiting. Levy can cast the technique around 5 or 6 times before exhausting his current mana. Each use also demands several seconds of concentration, a dangerous window if enemies are already inside melee range. Ultimate speed can help him survive after casting, but it cannot make the spell itself instantaneous. Stormwind's strength continues growing through practical advantages, stacked one on top of another rather than one impossible breakthrough solving everything. The building crews produce their own improvements when Toby successfully fires useful red bricks from local clay. Mario follows with workable mortar, capable of holding stronger structures together far better than the territory's rotting temporary construction. Levy rewards both breakthroughs and raises Toby from serf status into civilian life. One successful kiln has purchased a man's freedom in front of workers who now understand invention can change legal status, not just increase a master's profit. John eventually brings the first serious report from the potion workshop. He prepared 100 sets of supporting materials for wolf fighting fire potion and lost roughly 20 while adapting the process to local ingredients. 28 finished potions survived successfully, around a 1/3 success rate for a second-tier potion master working with unfamiliar substitutions. Levy starts using them immediately because every bottle represents cultivation time he cannot afford to earn slowly. The first dose pushes flame breathing forward by 31 experience points, a concrete gain the panel measures with perfect clarity. Repeated use still has limits, and many knights would risk severe problems after only several doses in a short period. Levy treats each bottle as condensed weeks rather than something to swallow carelessly, simply because the system can quantify the benefit. 4 days of controlled use move his breathing technique sharply upward, without waiting months for ordinary practice. The system provides certainty about progress, while the potions convert monster remains into save time. Together they make the normal frontier cultivation schedule look less like a law and more like a price Levy can sometimes pay around. John then asks him to visit the mouth of Cane River, where wreckage from the disaster that stranded him may have washed ashore. His lost magic wand could improve his combat and refining work, and another ingredient needed for potions may also be growing near the coast. Levy agrees because making Stormwind's only potion master more capable is worth a controlled expedition. The coast offers something stranger than gathered cargo before they find any personal belongings. Blood stains the water ahead, and torn sea creature bodies drift through the shallows after a violent battle that ended before Stormwind arrived. Levy refuses to send men into dark, bloody water at night when the thing responsible might still be feeding nearby. They camp on shore and wait for dawn to reveal what the sea has left behind. Morning exposes sharks, massive carcasses, and rarer creatures John recognizes immediately. Narwhals are among the dead, intelligent, magical beasts that can grow into 5th-tier seamounts, with enormous value along a dangerous coastline. Most adults are already dead or gone, but John notices movement near the bodies. A baby narwhal only around 2 meters long is still alive despite serious bite wounds. John tries forming a mental contract first, approaching carefully because a terrified newborn magical beast can reject even a skilled handler. The young creature refuses him and closes its mental space before he can establish trust. John teaches Levy the basic method and steps aside, expecting another slow attempt. Levy enters the newborn's awareness and presents the decision in terms simple enough for a frightened animal to understand. Accept the contract and receive food, protection, medical treatment, and a chance to grow. Reject it. And the humans nearby may eventually start discussing meat, hide, and cooking fires instead. The baby narwhal's resistance collapses much faster than it did under John's patient diplomacy. John can only stare as Levy establishes an unequal mental contract through a threat so practical that even a newborn understands the alternative. Once treated and stabilized, the creature becomes Stormwind's first living asset, capable of eventually dominating coastal water, instead of merely defending land. Levy names it Little Kun and begins using the contract for simple short-range communication while John handles the wounds. A full day of salvage produces nearly 50 tons of narwhal and megalodon meat. The soldiers also recover hides sufficient for more than 100 pieces of durable leather armor, plus teeth, horns, and magical materials worth storing. More carcasses remain offshore, but sea predators are gathering around them, turning free resources into a trap for anyone too greedy to stop. Levy ends the salvage, rather than paying for another windfall with trained soldiers. The group continues searching for John's wand and the plants he needs, but the missing weapon never appears along the nearby shore. They do find narcissus plants, and John carefully removes them with roots intact, so Stormwind can attempt local cultivation. Another ingredient once dependent on outside supply may now become a crop inside the territory. Then a soldier spots bright red feathers farther upstream, leading the group to a flock of firetail ducks. The magical birds are valued for decorative feathers, excellent meat, and enough low-tier strength to make live capture harder than ordinary hunting. Some firetail ducks can even reach first-tier strength, which makes breeding them alive more valuable and more complicated than simply shooting the flock. Levy wants breeding stock, not dinner, because a renewable flock is worth far more than one successful meal. John produces an unfinished sleeping mixture that works especially well on weaker magical beasts. Levy coats an arrow, spreads the drug near the flock, and turns the encounter into a capture operation instead of an archery contest. As the sleeping mixture diffuses through the water, the birds grow sluggish enough for Stormwind's men to secure live breeding stock without a slaughter. Stormwind gains another possible breeding resource on the return trip, but an arriving messenger ends any chance to enjoy the success. Clay reports that pig-headed orcs have seized skilled slaves purchased for Stormwind and are moving through the Grey Mountains. He followed with part of the night squad and requests reinforcements before the captives disappear into deeper territory. Those craftsmen are already paid for, but Levy cares even more about what abandoning them would do to every promise he has made about service and protection. He checks the panel before marching and chooses one immediate combat improvement for the rescue. Flame breathing is approaching 300 experience at first-tier novice rank, while lava meditation and earth collapse are progressing more slowly. Basic archery has reached its current ceiling, but wind-chasing arrow technique is ready to move. Levy spends one attribute point and pushes the technique into first-tier mastery before leaving Stormwind. 2 infantry companies, 1 spear company, and 2 archer squads march toward Clay's last reported position with Mia close to the Baron. The rescue force reaches the marked area by evening and finds horses hidden near the forest, with 2 apprentice knights guarding them. Clay left deliberate signs along his trail, but darkness makes immediate pursuit through mountain terrain an unnecessary risk to the whole force. Levy establishes camp and resumes the search at dawn. By midday, Clay returns from deeper in the mountains with fresh information, rather than waiting for the army to stumble into the enemy column. The pig-headed group raided a bandit stronghold, stole grain, and captured more than 300 additional serfs while carrying Stormwind's craftsmen. Its main leader is third tier, supported by a second-tier vanguard captain and 2 first-tier professionals. That force is dangerous enough to punish a careless attack, but still stands below Mia's 4th-tier strength if Stormwind controls the engagement. Clay adds that the raided bandits had 1 second-tier warrior and 2 first-tier fighters before losing the battle. The second-tier bandit died, while the 2 surviving first-tier men are now prisoners moving with the orc column. Levy almost appreciates the efficiency. The enemy is walking toward him, carrying stolen labor grain, trained prisoners, equipment, and military merit. He orders an ambush prepared along the road before the column can change direction. Archers hide where their firing lanes will not block the infantry's later advance, while Mia and stronger fighters position for the enemy professionals. The captive serfs are the hardest variable, because panic could push them directly into arrows or spear lines when fighting starts. Stormwind establishes simple signals instructing the captives to drop low and stay down as soon as the attack begins. When the pig-headed column finally enters the prepared ground, Levy's opening arrow targets the second-tier vanguard before officers can react. The first volley breaks confidence and direction at the same time, leaving ordinary fighters unsure where the attack is coming from. Mia moves the moment stronger enemies expose themselves, while Clay's knights strike from a second angle. Infantry closes escape routes, instead of charging blindly into the captive workers. Professional resistance collapses first, and the ordinary pig-headed fighters discover organized human troops blocking every reasonable retreat. By the end, 206 enemies are dead, including 1 third-tier, 1 second-tier, and 2 first-tier professionals. Another 71 survive as prisoners, while more than 300 serfs are recovered alive, instead of disappearing into orc territory. Stormwind also retrieves 65 long swords, 124 spears, 53 leather armors, and 3 full iron armor sets. More than 100 damaged weapons can still be repaired, reforged, or stripped for usable metal. The stolen grain exceeds 50 tons, strengthening reserves at exactly the moment army and population growth are consuming food quickly. The victory pays Stormwind back in people, equipment, grain, prisoners, and merit instead of only removing a threat. For Levy, the rescue matters just as much because the craftsmen see that being purchased by Stormwind does not mean being abandoned the moment recovery becomes expensive. Levy then questions the two captured first-tier bandits because their behavior does not match the ordinary criminals surrounding them. The men, Gaddy and George, claim they once served in Grey Fortress's third company before factional pressure from Auden and Rig pushed them out. Their former commander Hild and several companions later died, fighting pig-headed enemies, leaving a small group of trained survivors without a place to return. 8 elite soldiers still follow Gaddy and George, and Clay recognizes enough details to make the account plausible. Levy checks what his people can verify instead of accepting a convenient recruitment story because Stormwind happens to need professionals. The facts align closely enough that he offers contracts rather than chains. Gaddy, George, and their 8 veterans can serve Stormwind for 10 years under normal territorial benefits and strict loyalty requirements. They accept, giving Levy the core of a personal guard he has needed since the first assassination attempt. The rescued serfs and recovered supplies begin moving home, while Clay prepares a separate trip back to Grey Fortress. Prisoners and confirmed kills need official registration before merit can be exchanged for cultivation resources. The dead and captured pig-headed force produces more than 15 9th-class merits, plus 1 8th-class and 1 7th-class merit from professional kills. Clay's squad keeps the portion Levy previously promised rather than surrendering personal rewards upward. Levy directs 12 9th-class merits toward 12 advancement potions, choosing professional growth over storing honors that do nothing inside a warehouse. The higher merits support an exchange for 11 doses of life source fluid through the Night Squad's channels. Those resources can turn peak apprentices into real extraordinary fighters, multiplying Stormwind's defense far more than converting the merit into cash. The captured pig-headed prisoners can be sold for additional gold, which Levy orders spent on ordinary contract scrolls for the expanding organization. Clay heads for Grey Fortress with prisoners and documentation, while Levy escorts the rescued people and recovered supplies back to Stormwind. Not one of the purchased skilled slaves dies during the operation, preserving workers whose future output matters more than the price paid for them. Back home, Gaddy, George, and their 8 veterans sign the promised 10-year contracts. Levy appoints Gaddy captain of his personal guard and George vice captain. They select 42 capable serfs to complete a 52-man unit built around 2 first-tier warriors and 8 elite veterans. The new guard lives close enough to accompany Levy on territorial duties instead of remaining tied to one section of wall. Their first assignment is simple: raise the unit's combat ability before the Baron personally tests whether his protection is worth the food it consumes. Over the next 2 months, Stormwind's growth stops looking like a temporary emergency camp and starts behaving like a real territory. John receives more wolf-fighting fire and Narcissus materials for refinement while Charlie returns to fields, workshops, construction, salt, and population management. Dryfield crops are planted as a first stable agricultural base, and more land is reclaimed wherever labor and water allow. Success creates another shortage because mines, kilns, farms, fishing crews, workshop, and construction projects all compete for the same workers. Stormwind is running out of labor precisely because every new opportunity creates another place where labor would be profitable. Levy inspects fields, the Arrow Tree Grove, brick kilns, building replacements, and defensive works instead of trusting progress reports from a desk. He also visits the bay and spends time with Little Kun as the young narwhal continues recovering. The contract guarantees obedience, but Levy still invests effort and trust because a future 5th-tier seamount is more useful as a willing partner than a terrified animal. The mining island develops roads, temporary shelters, guard rotations, and a crude route from exposed ore toward the dock. Conditions remain harsh even by Stormwind standards, so Levy uses rotating labor rather than condemning one group to permanent island work. During one inspection, he notices workers carrying heavy ore by hand and across their shoulders over ground already cleared enough for wheels. Levy sketches a simple one-wheeled cart for 2 carpenters, adapting a familiar Earth idea to local carriage building skills. They understand the principle immediately and build a smaller frame around technology the territory already knows how to repair. Sometimes modern knowledge changes productivity without gunpowder, engines, or advanced chemistry. One wheel under a burden is enough. 3 days later, Clay returns from Grey Fortress carrying the exchanged cultivation resources. 12 advancement potions arrive beside 11 doses of life source fluid, and Levy immediately begins deciding who can convert them into strength fastest. Parker, Jenkins, Will, and Lowry are called first because each has reached the peak expected of elite ordinary soldiers. Their battle records give them enough merit to justify attempting professional advancement through the new potions. Levy recommends using the opportunity rather than hoarding merit, since a professional can earn future rewards more safely than an ordinary fighter can. The 4 veterans accept, because extraordinary status can transform not only their own careers, but the futures of their families. A successful breakthrough also makes future merit easier to earn, turning one expensive potion into a better chance of financing the next professional later. Stormwind's existing promise means successful. Advancement also creates a path for one descendant to receive professional training later. Eric and Thomas are called next, the 2 apprentice knights, who were nearly killed during the fight with Rig. Both stand close to formal knighthood, but lack enough personal merit to buy life source fluid on their own. Levy offers the resources alone, using the same principle he has applied elsewhere. Take strength now, then repay the territory through future merit. Neither apprentice hesitates once the rare fluid is actually sitting within reach. Stormwind began with 1 professional knight, beside a frightened 16-year-old exile being delivered toward a dangerous border. Now veterans, potion resources, mines, magical beasts, workshops, several companies, and a personal guard surround the same young baron. The transformation took weeks rather than years, but every gain came attached to another obligation, demanding food, labor, money, or protection. More soldiers need more grain before the army can expand safely. More craftsmen need housing before skilled workers can stay permanently instead of living inside improvised shelters. More ore requires boats, roads, furnaces, and blacksmiths before exposed rock becomes actual weapons. More professionals require potions and life source fluid before Stormwind can replace losses at extraordinary rank. The territory is becoming a machine that consumes whatever Levy feeds into it, and its most important weak point is becoming harder to ignore. Levy himself is still only a first-tier novice knight, despite holding speed capable of surprising stronger enemies. He delayed personal advancement while building enough structure around Stormwind that the territory would not collapse whenever he stopped supervising it. The system never stopped granting daily points, and wolf fighting fire potion has shortened the road his average talent would otherwise make painfully slow. One evening, Levy sits with another potion bottle while the sounds of the territory carry through his room. Hammering comes from workshops, replacing rotten structures with brick, while training calls rise from units that didn't exist when he first entered the valley. Carts move supplies toward warehouses, no longer filled with someone else's deliberate garbage. Charlie's staff works around salt and distilled liquor, instead of wondering whether the next grain shipment will be sabotaged. Little Kun recovers near the bay under guards, who now treat a magical beast as part of Stormwind's future rather than an impossible luxury. Across the water, serfs cut iron from rock that can eventually become the weapons used to keep those same workers alive. Near the Arrow Tree Grove, guards protect ammunition that renews itself from living roots. None of these advantages existed when Angelus's unwanted husband left Tulip City, carrying little more than a title and enemies who expected geography to kill him. Back then, Stormwind looked like a decorated grave placed beside orcs, monsters, hostile nobles, and a dangerous sea. Now anyone trying to reach Levy must account for walls, veteran, professionals, military contract, warning talents, and a territory learning how to finance its own defense. That still does not make Stormwind safe. Auden already proved human enemies can escalate from bad supplies to bandits, compromised officers, and professional assassins when simple sabotage fails. The Savage Mountains hold orcs and magical beasts far stronger than Stormwind's current army. The sea holds Nagas and predators powerful enough to destroy ships without caring which noble claims the shoreline. Even Panda's friendship depends more on liquor and mutual usefulness than on sentiment. Levy cannot remain the weakest important person at the center of an organization whose enemies keep raising the price of every attack. He opens the panel and studies flame breathing again, watching an experience requirement that once looked impossible shrink under points, battles, and potions. Stormwind finally has enough people that he can spend hours cultivating without personally checking every field, furnace, patrol, and hammer swing. The territory has bought him time, and now he intends to turn that time back into personal strength. Before fully treating into cultivation, Levy reviews what the organization can already do without him standing beside every decision. Parker and Jenkins can manage infantry training using the discipline they carried from Grey Fortress. Will and Lowry are building archers inside a system where talent can purchase promotion and eventually freedom. Russell's Spear Company protects miners, whose ore should reduce dependence on imported military metal. Creel manages another infantry force while construction continues around the Hall of Heroes. Gaddy and George train the personal guard that answers directly to Levy instead of to an inherited noble faction. Clay and Roger can rotate patrol duties while younger apprentice knights move toward professional rank. John converts monster parts and southern knowledge into cultivation resources a normal frontier workshop could never produce. Mia remains Stormwind's strongest immediate fighter, despite the uncomfortable slavery contract still defining part of their relationship. Charlie keeps food, housing, servant, workshops, and administration connected, while Levy concentrates on threats and growth. The network is fragile because every new success creates another place an enemy can hit. A failed harvest can starve soldiers faster than a sword, while a broken supply route can freeze construction across half the territory. One larger orc force could still expose how shallow Stormwind's extraordinary ranks remain. But fragility is no longer the same thing as helplessness. When Levy first woke in the carriage, one formal knight stood between him and a frontier designed to erase him. Now military merit can become medicine that creates new professionals from ordinary veterans. Monster corpses become capital for soldiers, equipment, workshop, and cultivation instead of remaining trophies after a battle. Captured bandit populations become farmers, builders, craftsmen, and future recruits supporting the territory that freed them from outlaw control. Exposed rock becomes future weapons once miners, furnaces, and smiths connect each stage of production. A strange grove becomes renewable ammunition, and a rescued baby narwhal becomes the beginning of actual naval power. None of those systems guarantee victory against stronger enemies, but together they make killing Stormwind far more expensive than it was supposed to be. Levy drinks the potion in his hand and feels familiar heat spread through his body as flame breathing begins circulating again. The panel waits at the edge of his vision, quietly recording another step toward the second tier. The frontier received an exile and expected a corpse. Instead, Stormwind now has an army, resources, growing industry, and a lord who keeps getting harder to kill. Levy closes his eyes and returns to cultivation, determined that the next enemy demanding his life will have to pay for the attempt.